I used to have a manager who would say, "Don't bring me the problem, bring me the solution." And I'm sure you've probably heard this somewhere along the way. And I'm a big believer in this. For one, it broke my habit of complaining because this manager would also say, "If you see there's a problem, then go fix it and come back and tell me what you did to solve it." And I've got to say that one manager was instrumental in teaching me about responsibility. Know why? Because I learned that excuses wouldn't cut it with him. The yeah, but excuses that I once used wasn't going to fly. Today, we're talking about excuses because underneath every excuse is a potential failure. Excuses waste our own time, and worse yet, we waste our own energy with these low vibrational thought patterns that get in the way of our success. This podcast is all about helping you with your spiritual growth so you can overcome obstacles and manifest your destiny to crystallize and materialize any dream, basically, to have success on life's journey. It's all about getting unstuck by unlocking your hidden power. So let's get started. Hi there, and welcome. My name is Remy, like Do Re Mi. I'm a best-selling author and creator of the Get Unstuck Revolution. I help extraordinary women just like you dissolve the obstacles in your path so you can bring success to you. Now let's get started with today's video. Okay, let me jump off the screen here so I can see my laptop. Today, we're talking about how to get past the excuses that hold us back, because underneath every excuse is a potential failure. Excuses waste our own time, and worse yet, waste our own energy with these low frequency thought patterns that get in the way of our success. If you'd like to see success in full abundance along life's journey, and if you're wanting to tap into greater knowingness and align with the higher consciousness of your infinite self, instead of the lower ego thinking that pushes success away, then this is for you. It's time to be unabashedly, unapologetically, happily untethered to ego thinking. It's time to align with the higher energies of our soul's path instead. This episode is for you if you wonder how to know when we're rationalizing and making excuses when we can't even see it because we're the most hardworking, dedicated, committed, action oriented person we know. The golden opportunity within our mistakes and our failures, and how a good strategy can obliterate what's holding us back, even when we don't know what that is. Yes, these episodes are about how to find your hidden power when you want to transform challenges into successes. I like to call it the audacity of alchemy. Because when we're feeling stuck, it's never the situation that has us stuck, it's our energy about it that's become stuck in anxiety, overwhelm, doubts, worries, frustrations, indecision, and even anger. And often this is because of a spiritual injury that we've experienced, some kind of hidden trauma. So it isn't the pain of our situation, it's the pain of not being connected in the natural energy of who we really are, of being connected to that magical part of us that's a creative vibrational being who can use positive energies to create what we want and bring it into physical manifestation. We can allow our manifestations to materialize and not get stuck in the negative vibrations that block them. These positive energies that we talk about so much are where we find the magic of alchemy, because our choice of frequency, our choice of those positive thoughts and emotions can change the course of our journey. So I had this manager who would say, "Don't bring me the problem, bring me the solution." But more often than not, he would say, "If you see there's a problem, just go fix it and then come back to me and tell me what you did to solve it." Not only did this teach me about responsibility and accountability, but it also taught me how to be proactive, how to think on my own. He didn't want to hear my lame excuses or reasons, but what I couldn't see at the time was that he was teaching me to be a leader. So today, we're going to talk about these excuses because they can paralyze us. Underneath every excuse is a potential failure, and I don't think any of us want to sit on that time bomb because it will eventually explode our world, sending us into a dark night of the soul or even worse. Most of all, excuses stop us from being who we really are as creative vibrational beings who can create what we want and bring it into physical manifestation. Yes, we talk about this every week, don't we? Every single week, we talk about not getting caught up in the negative emotions that block those things we want. And excuses are a negative emotion because they limit the possibilities that are there for us to grab. What we want to do is stop excusing ourselves from stepping up or growing up to our greatness. We want to acknowledge that if we're making excuses, we are wasting our time, and especially we're wasting our own positive energies. We don't want to allow excuses to ruin our life or our business. Now, if you're like me, this may ruffle your feathers a little bit. You may be thinking, are you kidding me, Remy? You'll never meet anyone who works harder than I do. You'll never meet anyone who tries more or is more committed or dedicated or action oriented than I am. I've tried everything though, and I still haven't been able to get things moving forward. Not that I'm not trying, but I'm not one to make excuses. And if this sounds like you, I get it, but stay with me here. Let's dig into the clever disguises that excuses can come in, and we're also going to talk about what to do with them. And I don't mean that we're going to take massive action and obliterate every excuse in the process. You've heard me say it before. All the action in the world won't matter if our energy and mindset are off. So let's break this down just a little bit and make sure we aren't ignoring or in denial about our excuses and trying to take action when these excuses are getting in the way of our greatness. So, step one, let's look at our mistakes or our failures, which are really nothing more than mistakes waiting to be corrected. Our failures are really nothing more than our mistakes that are waiting to be corrected, waiting for us to make a pivot. When we give an excuse, we're rationalizing our mistakes. If we say, oh, it's a market condition or an economic condition or election year or something along those lines, it may seem like we're pinpointing a cause, but we're still rationalizing our mistakes because the market could change. Lots of things could change, but our actions should be pretty much the same. Now, we could have a different conversation, and let me give you an example. Let's say that we have a basic business model that's been working for us. Let's use the example of a math tutor. Maybe we teach multiplication tables or how to use geometry in real life or some kind of theory. Maybe our lessons are 30 minutes each. Maybe our favorite students are of a certain age group. Maybe we prefer teaching trigonometry over anything else. We have a basic business model, a basic structure, right? But then we hit cold and flu season or the holidays or active summer schedules where kids and families are torn in so many different directions. Does our basic business model change? Or do we have a different conversation? One that involves the purpose of learning math, how it may impact someone's future, the skills being learned that are transferable to other areas of life, and all that. Or maybe our conversations turn toward the value we bring as a teacher. Now, whether we change the narrative or not, if there is indeed a market change or something along those lines, maybe it's not just conversations, but it's also our strategy that needs adjusting. Okay, so if our business is failing, are we blaming it on some condition around us? Let's not make the mistake of making excuses, because if we're making excuses, we aren't changing the narrative and we aren't changing the strategy. We need to make a pivot. So let's look at that rather than making excuses. All right, on to our second thing here. Where is there an opportunity to learn? Where is there an opportunity to learn? Now, this can be a double-edged sword because sometimes we don't know what we don't know until we find ourselves in some precarious position. So the best way to solve this when we don't know what we don't know is to ask questions. Maybe it's a self-discovery question that we pose to ourselves, like what sets our soul on fire that we aren't doing right now? I'll give you an example. I don't love the one-on-one work. I actually prefer teaching and workshops in groups. And so my schedule for one-on-ones has very limited availability. In fact, I don't advertise one-on-one work to a cold audience ever, but only to those of you who already know me. And we're aligned with these concepts that we talk about every week. This is something I've learned about how to best feed my own soul. So the opportunity might be a good self-discovery question to ask yourself. What sets your soul on fire that you aren't doing right now? What can you learn about yourself and what you enjoy? You know, a friend of mine is a musician and he's learned that he has to both teach and perform. If either one of those is out, his world just isn't right. That's something he's learned about himself. Now, there might also be an opportunity to learn a new skill or learn how a new resource works, something that will enhance your job or your business or your craft. Maybe it's a communication skill, maybe it's a sales skill. One thing that I used to do that I still do is that I like to set up 3 masterminding sessions a week with people that I know from different online groups. We'll spend a few minutes talking about my business and then do a turnaround and talk about theirs. In the process, we have a new set of eyes on our work, and I end up learning something every single time that I couldn't see before. Okay. And so, lastly, not just in work, but what about our relationships, either in business or at home? Instead of making an excuse or withdrawing or checking out when we feel under pressure, why not just ask, how am I doing? Am I contributing at a 10? And if I'm not, what could I do that would make this collaboration a 10? What would make this an equal investment in your mind? Just in getting curious, there's an opportunity to learn so much. All right. Let's look at number 3 here. Are you holding back on your own resources? Are you holding back on your own resources? I was on the phone the other day with someone who told me about her epiphany. She said that her obstacles had morphed into such a long, tangled up list that she had blown everything up into something insurmountable. In our work together, she had been experiencing some scarcity consciousness, not wanting to spend money on advertising, but to keep everything organic and to be as creative in that regard as she could. She had debts that she wanted to pay off, but didn't have the revenue yet where she wanted it to be, and a list of other reasons why she couldn't step up to the next level. I felt like she was holding back on her own resources. And so I mentioned to her that for most people, organic reach in a business is a break even proposition at best, no matter how creative they are. And for many people, until they get into digital advertising and dip into that side, they just don't reach the success they're craving. And when I suggested that she start researching this for herself, her scarcity consciousness really raised its ugly head. She blew her entire world up into something that just became insurmountable. So I gave her a couple of things to investigate, mostly some mindset work. And that's when she came back and said she realized that her obstacles could be knocked out one at a time. And she emailed me a draft of her plan broken down into bite-sized pieces. And just the exercise of doing this and breaking it down, she realized that she had been holding back on her own resources, trying to force a creativity, and that might not be the best strategy. Now she could eat that elephant one bite at a time and get things moving forward because now she could access her resources with a clear mind. It may seem like a big elephant that we have to eat, but we're really just making a doable checklist. We're making a checklist that's organized in such a way that we can cross off one item at a time. Let me give you an example. Our checklist won't say, make our business profitable, or solve the financial distress, or save enough to retire. Those aren't doable items. They're too lofty and grand and they're too broad. They aren't specific enough. So we want to break it down into pieces that can literally be checked off one at a time. Check, 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 that they're done. It's a doable checklist. Okay. So most anything can be solved or at least put into the right direction within 90 days or even less. But we can't hold back on our resources, especially our ability to confront the situation head on and our ability to brainstorm. Of course, all the action in the world won't work if our energy and mindset aren't right. And we're going to talk about that here in just a minute because it's a large part of getting past our excuses. But for now, let's move on to number 4 here. And that is that decisions move time along. We talked about this on a recent episode called Struggling to Make a Decision. Decisions move time along. We move forward or we stall depending on what choices we're making. So we sometimes have to roll our sleeves up, get out the little sticky notes, do some brainstorming, and if we'll start making these decisions and these choices one at a time, we can move out of stagnation more quickly. We just want to be careful that we aren't using time as an excuse, and we especially don't want to let time back us into a corner. We all get the same 24 hours each and every day, and we can use those hours wisely, or we let these excuses continue to stall us. So if we're feeling like there isn't enough time, or we're running out of money, or we have a scarcity of resources, we can look at what decisions we can make. We can start with that list of obstacles, or we could start with a list of possible solutions, and we can see which ones we can start to knock out right here and right now. What is the best use of our time? Or what I like to do is make a list where I can see the most impact the quickest. For instance, if I'm in sales, what can I do today to add revenue? If I'm in a relationship or some kind of partnership or a collaboration, how can I find one more hour a day to work on something that will move the needle there? We can't use time as an excuse. We want to use our time to make choices and decisions. And if we find ourselves making an excuse, we simply need to shift our perspective to what decisions or choices or solutions we can implement to get things moving forward. What are our priorities? What outcomes do we desire? And sometimes just getting these things out of our heads and onto some sticky notes, well, that can do wonders. Okay, so the next one, the number 5 here. And of course, we can't have a discussion about the excuses that get in our way without talking about our fears, right? And so this is one of my favorite quotes. Never trust your fears. They do not know your strength. Never trust your fears. They don't know your strength. You know, there are so many fears that we all carry, hundreds of thousands of millions, maybe. Fear of living in a tent, a fear of not surviving, fear of loss and losing, fear of hurting someone we love, fear of the unknown, and so on. And this can be paralyzing. Well, this is ego thinking at its best or at its worst. Our ego just loves to keep our fears alive. So, what can we do instead? Well, you know, people sometimes think that their fears hold them back, but we need fear or we might be too brave or too foolish. I remember how fearless I was when I was younger, and I did a lot of foolish things, not even thinking about the consequences. But we change as the years go by, don't we? I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm the kind of person who tends to walk right through my fears, right through the fire to get to the other side. But I do this in a smarter way these days, not the foolish ways that I attempted in my youth. Can you relate? Okay, so one of the best ways to overcome fear is to strategize. If you get nothing else out of today, this is an important word, to strategize. Instead of dealing with fear, we're moving to a different playground altogether. Fear and strategy can't really exist in the same space. Fear tends to either motivate us or debilitate us. So if we can shift to strategizing, we can get the narrative moving in a new direction, and our strategy becomes our new to-do list. We identify our obstacle. Instead of going into fear, we decide to strategize. And then as we brainstorm new possibilities, we're creating a new to-do list. And so if you were going to write this down, you'd write obstacle and then draw a little arrow that moves you into strategy, and draw a new little arrow and that moves you into your to-do list. Your obstacle becomes your strategy, and that becomes your to-do list. Make sense? It's simple. Let's say that, let's think of an example. Let's say that we want to start a YouTube channel about baking cupcakes, but we don't know how to start a YouTube channel. We don't have a camera, and we aren't exactly comfortable in front of a camera doing video anyway. Our kitchen doesn't have enough light. We aren't sure whether to focus on baking cupcakes or on the decorating part. All of a sudden, we find ourselves creating an insurmountable situation, right? But remember, we're going to make our checklist with doable items, things we can check off. We're going to take stock of our resources. We're going to take the opportunity to learn whatever we need to learn. We're going to expect to make mistakes and embrace those little failures as part of the process. We're going to make every little decision and every little choice we can, because that keeps time moving along. And rather than letting fears move in, we're going to strategize. And as we strategize, we'll take one obstacle at a time. Maybe we start with the YouTube thing and we create a strategy. We brainstorm, we figure it out, we look at all the possibilities. And after doing this, what we'll flesh out is a to-do list just for figuring out the YouTube thing. And then we can move on to the next obstacle. We're eating the elephant one bite at a time, but we don't allow the fears to move in, and we don't allow the excuses to move in, because underneath every excuse is the potential for failure. Excuses are a waste of our own time, and worse yet, we waste our own energy with these low vibrational thought patterns that get in the way of our success. So even though we're talking about setting our excuses aside, and even though we've talked about taking proactive action steps, well, of course, all this won't matter if our energy and mindset are off. One of my favorite quotes from Einstein, and you may remember because I've talked about it several times, he said, "Everything is energy, and that's all there is to it. Match the frequency of the reality you want, and you cannot help but get that reality. It can be no other way. This is not philosophy. This is physics. Match the frequency of the reality you want, and you cannot help but get that reality." So, above all else, regardless of any excuses, we are creative vibrational beings, able to create what we want and bring it to fruition without the negative vibrations that block it. So, above all else, we want to understand this idea about matching the frequency of the reality we want. This is how we change our circumstances, because this is how we create our new reality. Let's face it, excuses won't get us where we want to go. All they do is block our success. As we empower ourselves towards this self expression of who we are at our core without the negative emotions of ego, we're choosing a higher frequency, higher and better thoughts, because our choice of frequency, our choice of more positive emotions, changes the course of our journey. So, reflecting back on everything we covered today, how can you apply what you've learned? At the top of today's episode, I mentioned the manager who would say to me, "Don't bring me the problem, bring me the solution." This idea of matching the frequency of the reality we want is the most workable solution I've ever found, because the only thing required of us ever is to shift our vibration. We want to increase our focus toward the best possible and most joyful outcomes. Well, I hope this helps you as you're using the powers of alchemy to transform challenges and obstacles into positive new successes. This podcast is all about helping you have success on your spiritual growth journey. It's all about getting unstuck by unlocking your hidden power. If you still can't get your head around what's got you stuck, you can tell me about it. You can send me a question to questions@unlockyourhiddenpower.com, or you may not know that you can schedule a one-on-one session with your own personal unstuckologist, that's me, by visiting instantbreakthroughsession.com. This private session is designed to help you tap into your greatest resource, that's you, and together we can make quite a team toward calling in the transformational powers of alchemy. In our time together, we'll uncover your single biggest stuck point, the one you can't see. We'll also go over the most genius ways to create clarity so you can just move forward while one obstacle after another is obliterated. And we'll create a strategy to get you moving in a really good direction, the one that's aligned with your life purpose. If this sounds like a match made in heaven, you can hop on over to instantbreakthroughsession.com right now and book the time slot that works best for you. Well, thanks for joining me today, and I'm wishing you a life filled with all the alchemy you need to bring success to you. Feel free to share this video with anyone you know who's feeling stuck, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.